Hello, everyone. This is lesson number 2 on What is the Constitution by Patricia Brennan Demuth. And in this lesson, we're going to be previewing the book, not just looking at the pictures, but we're going to look at some of the text features of this book. So if you have your copy, you can get it out to kind of flip through. It's kind of fun to be able to hold it in your hands while you're doing that. If you don't have your copy, you can just follow along with the video. And we're doing this because we want to activate our brains. We want to get our brains ready to read. So let's get started. So in this lesson, we're going to be previewing the book. And by previewing the book, we're trying to activate the parts of our brain that know some things about this time in history, that know something about the Constitution. By doing that, we're going to remember a lot more and we're going to understand things better. And so that's why before we actually start reading on page 1, we want to do this preparation. Warming up your brain before you read helps you very, very much. So as with our previewing of the book, we're going to be using certain reading strategies, and it's a good idea to know what those are. So, for example, we're going to find and use book features like the table of contents, reference pages, and the index, so we could locate information later on. We're going to look at headings, photos, and illustrations. We're going to study them some before we even read the first words on the first page. We're going to use what we know to connect with the text. So we're going to think about other things that we know about this time in history, red, white, and blue, the Constitution. What is all this? And then last but not least, we're going to use text features like titles, headings, captions, and graphic features to help us understand and remember things better. So if you turn to the next page, the very first page is the cover page. We looked at that in the first lesson, so I've skipped that and proceeded on to these 2 pages right here. And the idea, again, is we want to get our brains activated. So let's pay attention to what's on these pages for a moment as we notice the useful parts of an informational book. So books that are nonfiction books tend to be structured the same way, like school textbooks and other informational books that you might read. For example, they will almost always have a title page. There'll be a dedication from the author. There will be some place that lists when the book was copyrighted, when it was made a legal book in certain ways. The table of contents. Then there's the text, the actual most of what's in the book. There might be some reference pages at the end. There's probably an index, and then a bibliography. Now in this book, for whatever reason, there is no index, so we're not going to talk about that any further. So we already looked at the title page, so let's notice at the top of this first page on the left here is the dedication. It's where the author is thanking the people that they love who sacrificed while they were writing this book that we could read. And so this is their little place to say, hey, I love you guys. Then over here you can see the copyright date. And so this book was copyrighted in 2018, so that's when it became kind of an official book. Handy to know. And then over here on the right-hand side, you can see it says contents. That's the table of contents, and it's telling us where the different chapters and different parts of the book are going to start. So if we wanted to quickly find chapter 5, small versus big, we could look here and see, oh, that starts on page 38. Well, at the end of the book, if you flip all the way to the back, page 106, that's this page now. Again, we'll come back to the text of the book in our next lesson. And so this says the timeline of the U.S. Constitution. And so if you pay attention to the date up at the very top, it says 1787. And then it's got a bunch of months and days of things that happened in 1787. Then you can notice the next year is 1788. And then the timeline makes some big jumps, and all of a sudden it's 1870. It says the 15th Amendment, which is the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, gives African American men the right to vote. So that's something that happened after the U.S. Civil War. So this timeline isn't perhaps a great timeline, because right next to it is this one that says Timeline of the World, and it's got a bunch of things. So first of all, you can see that 1787, this part of the timeline over on the left of the U.S. Constitution, if you wanted to squeeze it in onto the timeline of the world, you would have to squeeze it in right over here. But you can see this timeline of the world, it starts way back in 400 BC. And so that's over 2,000 years ago. And then it goes all the way up to 1974. President Richard Nixon resigns from office. And so that's covering a lot of ground. So this is a lot to cover in a timeline. So I think they threw this in as a convenience. It's not too helpful, but the information on here could be handy later. So we want to know that it's here. And then you can see, in fact, they even reference Martin Luther King. We spent a lot of time talking about him. So just pointing out, he made this timeline too. On the next page, the final page of the book, is the bibliography. And bibliography is an interesting word. You can figure out what it means if you look at the parts of the word. So the prefix of this word is biblio. And biblio is a prefix that means having to do with books. So somebody who really likes books is called a bibliophile. And then the end of this word, graphy, is a suffix that means something written or drawn. So like a photograph, photo means light. And so photograph is something written, made with light, and you know what a photograph is. So a bibliography then is really, it's a list of books that were used by the author. So in this case, you can see this list of books. They put in alphabetical order by the author's last name. And this is the author's way of giving credit to other authors whose books helped them. So when Patricia Brennan Demuth wrote this book, these were books that she looked at to give her information. And this is a very handy place to look if you want to know more, or you can see here how she's marked books for young readers with a star. And so these are books that if you found this topic to be especially interesting, this would be a place where you could go for more information.